full thing about where we are in this transition to the next aeon, right? Which is also a reference to a period of time in this age of Aquarius, which I also titled in my last book, PHILOMATH, I titled it The Aquarian Renaissance, right? The Aquarian Enlightenment. And this Aquarian Enlightenment, I believe, is accompanied by the water bearer, right? That's the story of the water bearer. That is actually Metatron. It is Hermes. It's Thoth. Another is Aeon. The ancient name of Heliopolis was actually Aeon. And the ancient name of the pyramid architect, even known by the current, believers in the dynastic story for Egypt, was a fellow by the name of Aeon. So it literally was Hermes. He existed, across different pantheons from Sumeria all the way through to Egypt. Sumeria had 7 gods, right? And you've got Enki, and then that translates over to Thoth in the Egyptian pantheon. And Thoth also sounds a lot like the word thought. So it's all based on this concept. And even the word Yahweh, which is the name of God, can actually be seen as THTH. And THTH in Hebrew, because there's no vowel in Hebrew that's represented in letter, it would just be pronounced Thoth, right? If that's how it were written to us in an anglicized form. So in fact, THTH was one of the ways that was given by the Royal Arch Freemasons in the UK, back in the 1600s and 1700s, as a representation of this notion of Thoth. TH was one of the encrypted symbologies, right? And the ligature of those 2 letters that was used by Shakespeare and many others, Sir Francis Bacon, and those who actually penned what we today term as the King James translation of the Bible, which was done in 1611. So this has been a concept that has been permeating through time almost seamlessly, from ancient wisdom keepers like Pythagoras all the way through to Plato, which was 300 years later or 250 years later, and then have that go all the way through Aristophanes. You could take and track pretty much every polymath throughout history has been a devotee of Hermetic wisdom. And it's a different path that's about experiential learning simulation, that we can learn how to fall in love with ourselves and our condition and turn this place into a heavenly experience. Transcend this experience is on the timeline that we've already determined through our higher self. I believe that what we call destiny is actually just the free will of the higher self. It's the reemergence of this concept of a God figure on earth. And that's what the transition from yin yang to yin shen yang actually is referenced to. It's being able to recognize the value of the polarity. You realize the purpose that polarity plays. And I think that the 7 principles of Hermeticism teach us first and foremost that the universe is about mentalism. It's a mental universe. And then it goes into all the other aspects of that, like polarity, gender, right? Cause and effect, causality, all the things that we have kind of looked at the earth and said, wait, these are different principles that show up in language that comes to us from Newton, for example. Every action must have an equal opposite reaction. And that's true in physics also. And you could see these principles mirroring all over the place. Is it a coincidence that there's 50% of the population that would consider themselves conservatives and 50% of the population is going to consider themselves more liberal? Or is it just a function of this polarity that's built into the design of this giant school that we're in? And depending on your perspective, some would say, it's a metatronic distortion because we're stuck in a cube of learning that is really difficult, because in this school, we learn through experiencing the opposites. And as we experience the opposites of things, we actually can grasp the thing that we wanted to learn in the first place and why we're here. So in other words, if you want to learn what pleasure is like, you have to come here to experience pain until you no longer judge pain for what it is to you, but actually you start to realize that it's teaching you pleasure. That might sound a little sadomasochistic, right? And so it's difficult for us to grasp until you actually go through the experience of it and realize that in the seed of every experience of love will be heartbreak as well. And they're literally musical tones. This is the human story. And as we go through this human story and we get closer and closer to the divine, we will see more and more symbologies of Hermes and Thoth popping up literally everywhere. And I experienced this just recently when I was in Egypt.